What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina Conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Dean Monti. We're talking about the Monosexual. That book is available now. A really enjoyable conversation. I know I say this every time, but Dean Monti was such a joy to talk to. He's such a gem. I really enjoyed getting into his headspace about writing the Monosexual and digging, just diving deeper into like the character and the psyche and the journey that he's on. So I definitely recommend it to people who are into like contemporary fiction, but it's really entertaining. Like I promise you, I laughed, I giggled. I it was a good book, and this conversation I really enjoyed. I think it's a good one for you guys to listen to. But either way, without further ado, here is Dean Monti.
So today we've got Dean Monti. We're talking about The Monosexual. That book is available now. Dean, thank you so much for joining me today. This book, I remember not really knowing what to expect except because the cover was funny too, but I breezed through it so much more quickly than I expected. I really liked Vince as a character. He's hilarious. And I don't know, we'll get into it, but I really appreciated how you balanced not horrible subject matter, but a heartbreaking story
Yeah.
with humor. We'll get all up into it, but thanks for meeting and chatting today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Megan. I've been looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And thanks for the nice review. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Yeah. So to get started, can you give like a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't read it yet?
Yeah. No, I can't. I can't at all. Yeah. No, I can tell you that I was writing about love and loss and obsession, and I wanted something for Vincent. I wanted Vincent to have this very myopic vision that he was the only person in the world that could have a love so perfect, and that's what I was going with. And he can't let go of this idea of his perfect love, and when she leaves him, when she's gone from his life, he's totally adrift. He doesn't know what to do. And then, of course, being a character in a book, things start to happen to him, things start piling on him, and inopportune events start happening. So it just builds from there. Yeah.
Yeah, he can't catch a break.
No.
I just remember if anybody who reads like an excerpt or reads like a little summary, they can get the gist of, but then when they actually go through it, you're just like, how much of it is caused by him and his attitude versus how much is just bad luck? But
Yeah,
it's, yeah.
he's definitely holding on to
Mm.
an idealized version of love. He needs it almost like a pathology. It's something that is something that has both happened to him, but also something that he holds on to very tightly, and for some reason needs to tell others about it as well in a strange way, so that he can own it, so that it can only be his. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because I never even heard of because basically the monosexual is like a play on demisexual, where it's just like
Correct.
very like they need to experience that like emotional intimacy before they are like attracted, like even physically, like physiologically like responding to that person.
Right.
And but that wasn't deep enough for him, right?
Yeah, for people new to the term, it's a totally invented term. One of my nephews pointed out that it has both Greek and Latin parts, which I didn't know until they told me that. But I like this idea of mono versus stereo. There are other words that probably fit, but monosexual just sounded right for this.
Yeah, but like I mentioned on the cover, you just see like cartoon sushi.
Yeah, it's interesting when they showed me the cover, and we had a couple different, the publishers had a couple different ideas, and I had a few ideas of my own, but it's unidentifiable sushi, and it's not clear what the sushi is doing to each other on the cover. It almost looks a little rude if you can see it there in the background. It looks a little strange, and I thought I needed to add like another element, but I think the monosexual with a picture of odd shaped sushi would intrigue enough people to want to see what it was about. So that's what we went with.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really hard I imagine it's hard to picture something, the subject matter, this type of story with what the cover might look like, because
Yeah.
it does go in with that lighthearted tone,
Yeah.
And then once the reader gets deeper into it, then we realize, oh, like this, okay, like you're stringing us, like you're pulling us in a little bit gently, and then almost, I don't want to say like a bait and switch because it's not like that intense. It's
It could
meet
have,
we meet
yeah.
Vince, and he's in a precarious situation, right?
Had another idea that the cover should have had some sort of look like a Sinatra album cover because Sinatra does loom so large in this thing. But we ended up with this strange cover. Yeah.
So this is not your first book, right? You have another one that's like
Yep.
along the same lines. It falls in the genre.
It does. It does. These two books that I've published are in the same vein, and then I've written other books that have not been published yet that
Mm.
I'm still working on that go into other areas. But these two are in the same kind of lane. My first book, The Sweep of the Second Hand, was also a kind of lost love story of a person going through past relationships and trying to figure things out. So those kinds of situational things I think are great to mine for both humor and sadness and everything that you need in a good book.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's so I want to like tap into that. Can you go into like your background a little bit and maybe how were there any experiences between the two titles that you published? Did you approach it differently? Were there any big lessons learned or anything super different that kind of you call out to, anything like
Yeah.
that?
My process is always the same. I don't go in with preconceived notions. I don't outline and I don't exactly know where I'm going, and I'm really happy with that. I just treat it very zen like and go in each time not knowing where the plot is going to go and letting it take me where it wants to take me, and then in the editing process then I can sort of form it the way I like. And it's amazing. A lot of people are, I think, everybody's got to work differently. I understand that certain genres and so forth, you need to work with what I want to say, a framework or what's the word?
Outline or
Outline. That's the word I'm blanking out on. Thank you. Yes. Because I don't work with an outline in the early drafts. I just go with my gut on putting the character into conflict and seeing where it goes from there. And I think it's attributed to Hemingway, this idea of never going to the end of a chapter, always stopping before you're completely done, so that every time you sit down, then you don't get stuck. Every time you sit down and write, you're in the middle of it. You're not at the end of it trying to come up with chapter 5 or something intimidating like that. So I've always written like that. I've always sat down and started in the middle and just gone with the flow of whatever's in front of me on the page with no idea of where it's going to go really until
yeah.
you get to the later stages. Yeah.
That's common with a lot of authors I speak to.
Yeah.
They are pantsers, I think that's what the
Hmm.
term is. But I imagine, yeah, unless you're getting, like, super sophisticated, that's usually how it goes, right? Unless you're
Yeah.
trying to write, like, a 4 or 5-book saga, you gotta be consistent and make connections and offer something a little bit deeper there.
Particularly
Er
my worlds are very small compared to sci-fi or even some mystery genres or even thriller genres and things like that.
Yeah.
So I can keep it a little looser, but that's what keeps it interesting for me.
Yeah, I'm curious also, that brings me to another one of my questions was like,
Mhm.
did you have to do like any research? Like it's I don't know, was it a lot of ideas that kind of just popped into your head based on your own knowledge or familiarity, or were like there times where maybe you needed some clarity or you needed some other ideas? Like did you have a mood board? Did you have post-it notes? Was there anything fascinating that you learned? Things like that?
There was like I do have a best friend who's a pilot. He's a commercial pilot, and I've known him for many years. But this is fiction, and none of those conversations were any conversations that we had. Although when I did have things like how do planes stay in the air
Yeah.
and what is that, then we I told him what I learned and just confirmed about the Bernoulli effect, about lift and all these other things that I still don't believe. I don't know what keeps airplanes in the air. Actually, I really don't believe any of it. I just never want to get on a plane again. Actually, but
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
man.
but
Was there a little projecting then in the
so
your
there is Xanax, but there's no one to personally fly a plane for you like there is in the Monosexual. That never happens. And actually, you'd be surprised. I think how often it would be this process that I'm talking about of just sitting down and thinking what is top of mind. And sometimes it would be like how do planes stay in the air. Sometimes it
Mhm.
would be about sushi, and sometimes it would be about karaoke, and other times it would be about music. So whatever was top of mind, I tried to stay in that place, and without forcing it into the book, but just working with whatever I was thinking about. So no real research, and I also I've worked in association publishing for decades. First with the Veterinary Association, and then with the Dermatology American Academy of Dermatology. There's nothing that's taken lifted from my actual experience, other than I do know what it's like to be booked into a very small hotel room. That's one thing that I have much experience on over the years of working for association publishing. That's drawn from experience, but nothing that's actually happened. Yeah.
That's so funny. I think that's also some of those little tidbits also feed into Vince as a character
Hmm.
because yeah, he doesn't want to fly, so he's only going to fly if his friend is personally
Yeah.
piloting the aircraft. I
Mhm.
thought that was so funny because even his friend is like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
And then just some of the situations you get him into without being too spoilery were just the how he makes an enemy for life with the situation where he's asking for a picture and
Yes.
then type
Yeah.
of picture and he just
The closest thing to reality in that book, because everything is raised to a level of absurdity. Years ago, that part of it happened. There was a convention I went to, a veterinary convention. Everybody had different areas that they had to go to. Some people had horses, and I had swine. So I was assigned to swine and had to go to the swine convention in
oh my
St. Louis,
goodness.
Missouri. And I
I
remember them talking. It's a really strange thing, too.
was gonna say to be a fly on the wall at that
But it's
convention.
really strange because it's veterinary medicine, and they're talking about how they have actual people coming up giving lectures on how to keep pigs healthy until you slaughter them. It's strange business. But there was a picture of a flood somewhere down south, and these pigs had been stranded literally on the roof of a barn, a tin barn. And I did use the photo, and I did use the caption, pigs on a hot tin roof. And to me, it was just an exact representation of what these pigs were on a hot tin roof. And we did get a letter.
Oh
And the
my
thing about
god.
that is that anybody who's worked in association writing knows that one letter can change policy. But in my case, I wasn't fired. I was talked to.
Oh
I was
my
talked to
god.
I was talked to for a few minutes and asked to write a letter of apology, I think, which I did. But then, see, that's where the imagination goes. What if you got really smarmy about it and actually started to write this really nasty letter back and the repercussions of that, which again never happened, but I thought it was a fun area to mine for humor. So that's what he does. He writes this horrible letter back to this person that he has never met, and I never met that person either in real life. It was just a single nasty letter, but I turned her into a character, and she's an interesting character. I liked writing that.
She was also very funny too, but she was just like a hot mess. It's like I didn't know like such a like a minor character could make such an impression because she was I loved her. I was like, oh, poor girl. Like what like
Yeah,
what
in early drafts, I think she came in at the beginning as just a catalyst for him getting fired, and then in the writing process, it came back around. What if he ran into her again? And that was such fun to write that whole party scene and running into her again and all that happened. I really enjoyed that. And of course, it all circled back to what actually happened to Vincent, where we start with him in the book in the hospital and all that, and then we start to figure things out. But that
that's
all happened
really
very organically. It wasn't really
yeah.
plotted out heavily on paper. Yeah.
That's so funny. I'm glad that happened because that was definitely like a smart choice and a very entertaining choice. So was that like the letter that you had Vincent write back? Was that the letter that you wish you wrote back or like
Yeah. And in real life, the person that wrote the letter never sent a photograph of herself or anything like that. That's totally made up.
it's
Yeah.
I know it's so
I
neat
thought that
because when
was,
I
I
read
thought that
that,
was,
I was like, that is so is a little unhinged. Who does that?
Yeah.
And then Vincent's he had a comment on it too. Dude, you can keep your thoughts to yourself. What
Yeah.
it just make I just even though he was just like work the reader at that point we're still getting into his character, the type of person he is. He thinks he wants to be very unique, or he insists that what he's experiencing is very unique to him.
Yes.
And it was just so funny, even as the people's opinions of that picture and that woman are really against what, like, he thinks about it. It gives us more insight into who he is as a character, where he's just like he's almost like forcing that individuality, like forcing that uniqueness a little bit, or he's just thinks everyone around him is insane. Like, what are you thinking?
It's interesting, and without giving away too many spoilers, I've realized by just, I don't think about these questions and answers until much later, but I've realized recently that Dr. Borden is sort of the anti-Melissa, right? I mean, she's the exact opposite of what he wants in life, but she is obsessed in her own way, and she is singularly driven in her own way, much in the way that Vincent is, but not in the crazy homicidal way that Dr. Borden is. I think there's an interesting balance there between those two characters.
Yeah, especially with the other kind of love interest, but he's wants to make it clear he's not interested that way.
Yeah,
I think her name was Paige.
Paige. Yeah.
Like she's really different from what readers know about Melissa too, but she's not seems she doesn't quite give up. She's just like non-threatening. She's just even though he has no idea if he could trust her, because she's I can help you with this and let's go
Right.
here and have lunch first. Like what
Hmm.
and he's okay, like the whole time he says it's not a date, just so you know, like I'm
Right.
not interested. She's yeah, I got it, buddy. Like
I think from my experience, love is also like about timing. There's nothing wrong with Paige. Paige is fine, and he should
yeah.
absolutely be like talking to her and hanging out with her, and she seems like a great person to me. But the timing is just terrible for this thing to happen because he's so hung up and he's so obsessed with being in San Caliente, which is not a real town either, that he can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a shame because, like you said, there's absolutely she's a fine person. She seems legit. It would be like a healthy toe step back into anything, feeling anything for anyone ever again. She seems like very casual and not scared off. She's not too intense. She may be a little bit pushy, but she's also very like non-threatening. She's no, what's the big deal? We're just doing this. Like
Yeah,
here,
and
trust me.
yeah, I think when he starts to realize some of those things, noticing her figure when she's standing on the deck, or things that he wouldn't normally be noticing because he's such a monosexual, then the sun gets in his eyes in a big way, and then he starts to. I think that's when everything starts to shift a little bit for him, right? And then he starts to have to rethink his notions about things.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost we're and readers are anticipating it. We're just when's it gonna happen? When's that shift gonna take place? Like when's it gonna click a little bit? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
It's an odd book because there is a turn in the book, and there is some unexpectedness in the book. But I think that most people that I've talked to so far have an idea that something like that is coming, but it doesn't spoil the book. It doesn't. It's
mm,
just something that the readers are waiting for Vincent to catch up on, perhaps. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, that happens with some genres too. It's I don't know, the big romance trope is like there has to be like a happily ever after or happy for now. If the couple doesn't if the love interests don't end up together, then what are you doing? You're breaking like an unspoken rule. So yeah, I think and like with crime thrillers, crime fiction, murder mysteries,
Yeah,
suspense novels, things like that, there's a formula to follow, but it's just like how are you going to do that? There could be a million ways to tell one story, to tell Vince's story, and it's like how is he going to get there?
yeah,
And when is it how is it going to happen? But there's also I don't know if this was intentional or not, but one could he's teetering on the I don't know, he's like on the fence of some mental health issues or if or I don't know if it's just like his grieving process, or
Yes.
there's some denial there's some delusion, it's just reminded me of a bit because I felt for him once we realized what happened. You're just like, oh shit, this is a bit deeper than
Right.
what we were being led on to. It's like once you realize it, you're like, oh my God.
Perhaps the biggest difference between myself and the main character is that I know when to get into therapy. And I'm not sure that Vincent never even considers it. And he should. He should. I know that, like, one of the when we chatted before this, one of the questions you had was advice or something would you give to your character? See a therapist and talk
Yeah.
talk some of these things out. Maybe take some medication if you need to for your obsessive condition. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it's, but because he's so self-assured and he's
Mhm.
so convinced that he's no, like, this is just my situation and nobody else can understand it because it's unique to me. It's like you that feeds into it. That feeds into his denial and his like reluctance to consider that he may need to, yeah, seek out help, seek out something. Like he needs to be on something or seeing someone regularly. And it's just, yeah, it's not like even really a train wreck. It's just, I think maybe the train wrecks, it's not a wreck, right? It's just it's not like he's falling down into a spiral. It's like he's still coasting, but
It's a series
he's
of
not.
small wrecks, yes.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not getting there. He's
No.
not getting there.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think, yeah, it was just like approaching the subject matter of like his character. Is he really have mental health issues, or does he really just have, what is that? Is it just the PTSD or non unrealized PTSD? It's just,
A number of real there are, like, without giving too much away, there is actually two realizations that come to him about how his relationship with Melissa came to an end. So he has to deal with both of those and what they mean. And I left those questions open ended because they'll forever have to be open ended for Vincent as well. So it's something
mm,
that he'll have to work out and figure out. So I didn't want to go into that part of it too deeply. There, in earlier drafts, I think there was some background about the person that Melissa, her friend in California. There was a lot more information on that, but I realized that for the book to move along at a good pace, you didn't need to get into that backstory so much about Melissa. You just needed to get a sense that she was important to him. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because it's not, yeah, I think that was a good choice because at what point do you, aside from slowing down the story, at what point does it become more, have like more mystery elements to it? Because he's still not sure what went on there, and it wasn't about him finding out what happened, it was about him moving on.
Right.
And it's the readers are we're Vince is our narrator essentially, right? It's we're seeing the story through his eyes, so it makes sense that maybe the reader doesn't know more than Vince does.
Well, I was a big fan of the author Paul Auster, who we lost earlier this year, and he writes absurdist fiction really well too, like Music of Chance, and he wrote the screenplay for Smoke. But he said that every good book is a mystery, and I think that's true. I think every good book is trying to uncover some mystery about either character or somebody's life or something that they can't resolve. All my books have some element of mystery in them, something that needs to be resolved or figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because this is very character driven, right?
Mhm.
That's what the story is. So that's what you got to focus on is what you're going to put him through and how he's going to react to it and how he's going to get out of it and his little quirks and how that's moving him along. I don't know. I just really liked him as a character because I think even within the first few pages when we meet him in his situation and his thought process, we're very clued in right away, like the kind
Yeah.
of person that he is. He
Mhm.
was like, "Can I feel my leg? Can I feel my body parts, that's very important. Do I still have
Yeah,
movement?
right.
And I loved it. I loved it because it was just like we we just see this, we tap into his psyche because he's like still evaluating the situation and he doesn't remember
I
everything
thought that
right
was an
away.
interesting way to develop character is somebody that has just for the moment lost their memory and needs to start thinking, what is my life and who am I and what's important to me? And so a few things come back to him in the hospital room one by one. And I think through those little tidbits, you start to get a picture of Vincent without having to describe what he looks like or where he lives or anything like that. You just start to get a picture of the kind of person that he is.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just it was funny, and then it was also like it grabs your attention right away. You're like, "Okay, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, how did he get here?" It's like record scratch, right? If you're watching a movie, then it's just, "Okay, nope, let's backtrack. Let's learn about what happened to him."
When I was teaching at College of DuPage here in Glen Ellen, Illinois, for a while, and teaching adult classes at night, and that's one of the things that I would always teach is just to put your characters in conflict like as quickly as possible. Whatever the conflict is, it could be quite small or it could be quite large, like you don't know if you have the rest of your body or whatever, and then work from there. Because I'm just not an author that can start with it was a sunny day and things like that. I need to get my characters in conflict right away.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice because it definitely it, you want to respect the reader's time and energy.
Yeah,
And with especially the Monosexual, it's not a big book. It's like a very much standalone story about one person and how they're dealing with their loss, but it's also hilarious. Like you're just watching
thank
him
you.
and his attitude and his it's like the situations that he finds himself in one after the other, and just his outlook on it all. It's both equally parts like heartbreaking and and entertaining, and it was great. So like I think that's so important. So do you teach creative writing then?
I no, I just did for a few years, about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That sort of process is like what Seinfeld or Larry David does with just putting characters in very awkward situations and seeing how they get out of them and then complicating them one step
Yeah.
further. And I that's what I enjoy doing is just complicating their lives and then midway through the book you try and dig your way back out of it and
Yeah.
see if you can get them out of it.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious as to if there were any like skills or that maybe that from your teaching of writing that helped you prepare
Yeah.
for picking up these types of projects.
For one thing, like I said, I started writing when I was very young. Short stories and serialized stories that I did in like in seventh and eighth grade, which taught me about, for lack of a better word, cliffhangers. Just like getting somebody to the edge of something and wanting to read on to the next section. I started that very young. And then I was writing plays for my classes when I was like in grade school and things like that. And then I did theater at College of DuPage years ago, and I learned a lot about the rhythms of dialogue. And then I also took at least one or two improv classes. And again, that sort of spontaneous, what would you say in the moment? That sort of yes, and keep going with something like that. I think dialogue classes, I think places where you can learn about dialogue like theater or improv classes can be very helpful because a lot of people seem to struggle with dialogue or they use it as a way to give heavy exposition, which is not always a good thing either. It's usually not. So I try to keep my conversations very natural and free flowing. But I like writing dialogue. I think because I wrote plays before I wrote novels. But it's been like this slow progression of writing short pieces and then plays which were a little bit longer and then a little bit longer plays and then eventually convincing myself or being convinced that maybe I could try writing novels and then I've been writing novels for quite a while.
Yeah, I think that was a good way to do it. I think that's yeah, you want to keep challenging yourself and
Yeah.
then you're like, let's see what I can do here. And yeah, I that's a good point where because writing like a screenplay and writing a short story and writing a longer novel is like also different, but there are these skills that you just evaluate the delivery and what needs to happen and go from there. Cause I always wonder about how authors can create dialogue that's like interesting and that's not awkward or that's not boring or that's not
Yeah.
and actually serves a purpose, not just info dumping. And it's just
It comes
there's so
from,
many
yeah.
layers to it.
It comes from listening. I think I've always been a good listener. I always enjoy sitting back and listening to somebody tell their stories or listening in on a good conversation or again, theater and these classes. And another thing I thought of today in advance of our chat was that I never talked much about the years of journalism that I did working for Association Publishing because it does teach you to get to the point and make sure that people understand what it is that you want to communicate right away. That whole don't bury the lead thing. It's get people the information that they need, cut out the information that they don't need, which is why I think this book reads very quickly and because I did so much cutting in the last version of it. Not hundreds of pages, but just little cuts here and there along the way of things that were just not necessary to tell the story. And when I say necessary to tell the story, I'm as guilty as anybody that I'll leave in something if I think it's funny to me.
Yeah. I know you're just like, I don't know, with your editing experience, like getting notes back, getting feedback, like
No,
waiting for the funny parts and those reactions. Did you laugh at this part? Come on.
that's the difference between like stage performance and something like stand-up comedy
Yeah.
and writing is you don't get that immediate reaction. You do have to trust your instincts a lot and really hope. I write it to make myself laugh first always, and I enjoy it that way. And then I'm always like surprised with someone like you, Megan, will say, oh my gosh, this part really made me laugh. That surprises and pleases me that someone else would enjoy it as well. Because if I'm going to be published, then I want to make that kind of connection and make somebody smile or laugh or whatever or feel something. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just it was because you got a little outrageous with it. But it was perfect. It was just because Vince is such an interesting character.
Thank you.
He makes sure he is like interesting, and it was just you couldn't tell him nothing. Nobody could tell him nothing,
No.
and he just made a couple bad choices in his quest to figure things out, like falling asleep by the pool and trusting mystery sushi and
Yeah.
getting upset that people were butchering Sinatra on the karaoke machine. Like he
Yeah,
was
that's
just
another big difference between me and Vincent is that I enjoy karaoke very much, and I wanted Vincent to be like this like amazing Sinatra singer. That would not be me. I grew up with Sinatra records. My dad played them like all the time, and he would sing like to every single one of them. So that's where all that Sinatra stuff comes from. My dad mostly from playing those Sinatra records all the time. I can't sing. I can sing, but I can't sing like that. I wish I could.
oh.
Yeah. Growing up on that had quite an impact on me. Yeah.
Yeah, Sinatra does have a very distinguishable, very talented voice. So he's a classic. I remember I went through a little phase where I was like adding Sinatra and some of those other genres, like the music to my like playlists and stuff just for when I was in a certain mood. I get it. It was just really funny. Like
There's a Sinatra quote. I'm gonna butcher it myself about how Sinatra once said that if you're feeling when people are feeling sad or romantic, they listen to me, and it's true. A lot of people use that as background music.
it's something about his voice too. And I don't think I don't follow a whole lot of the music industry, but I can't remember if there's anybody who's been close to being able to have his depth and his range. I
No,
haven't really
no,
seen. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so just a couple more questions
sure,
before we wrap up
absolutely,
here.
yeah.
Yeah. So you touched on this earlier. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I have to confess that the serious parts are definitely the hardest for me to write because I don't know. I always want to default to probably something humorous or there were some difficult things to write. that, as you can imagine, in parts of the book about the breakup and things like that. Interesting, good experience for me, but definitely difficult to write. And then the fun things are the details. There was a hotel in St. Louis I went to with my wife years ago, and it's still there. But they have all these theme rooms. They have different themes for every. And we were in the Beverly Hillbillies. There was a Buddy Epson room, and it had
Uh,
pictures of Buddy Epson on the wall. And I thought it would be like just fun to explore this idea of a presidential suite, but based on what the size of the president or who was president first, or a Lincoln floor that had to do with the tunnel in the car instead of the man, and different things like that. So that was a lot of fun to write. The whole um, thing that happened in the karaoke bar where he's like cornered on all sides, that was a lot of fun to write, getting him out of that situation. I really enjoyed writing that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell those that you had a little more fun with those moments because they were fun to read. I feel like the energy because it was so funny because I totally forgot about the whole scheme with the president with the hotel rooms and the themes. It was just like
Yeah, he's in the
and
James
poor
Madison.
Vince, he was just like so upset about it.
Like because you go to a hotel and you're told that you're going to be on the presidential floor, and you think, oh,
Yeah,
I'm going to get a good room, and then you end up in the James Madison room, and you find out that it's the James Madison room because he was the smallest president, and he gets the smallest room in the hotel. And I've had the smallest room in the hotel, but it wasn't a James Madison room. But
yeah, there you go.
yeah.
I know. I try because I travel for work occasionally for my 9 to 5, and it's just a matter of these are my options that I like. Sometimes I do have a choice, and sometimes I do not. Which I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna make the most of it. So that is, I relate a little bit, but I'm also not like. Oh, that's where the similarities end because I'm not so outrageous that like Vince, where I'd be so upset about it and then be like, "What? Are you serious? Wait, what?"
I can't
Because he
remember.
just like,
Yeah, I can't remember if it's in the book, but I remember because I'm always checking in with a lot of doctors at the
yeah.
same time. And every so often I'll get to the front desk to check in, and it'll be, "Oh, Dr. Monty, we have your," and I'll think, I'm not gonna
Yeah, yeah,
touch that. You
yeah,
give Dr. Monty whatever room you think Dr. Monty
yes.
should get. So
Oh my
don't tell my
gosh.
work people that.
I know, right? Just like I'll edit that part out
Yeah,
or Dean who? What are you talking
yeah.
about? So, you touched on this a little bit too. What do you hope readers get out of the story?
Really, I want them to have some of the same experience that I had writing it. Some of those same experiences of just being entertained and being amused, and hopefully getting something a little deeper about making changes in your life when things aren't working for you, making those shifts in your life. In my last book, the character also needed to change. And changes don't need to be huge, but I think you just have to recognize who you are and what you can do about it and take it from there. So if people take a little bit of that away from it, that would be great.
Yeah, what I got out of it, it was like I definitely felt for the character and I was entertained and I was also like it unexpectedly tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. And
Oh,
so
good.
like it was and I just thought it was as tricky as it is to juxtapose like a sad story with humor.
Yeah.
I you found that special sauce, like you found that special balance and it just made them that story that much more like entertaining and meaningful. I think Vince's story will resonate with a lot hopefully, but as sad as that might seem to say, yeah. Dean Monti, what is next? Are you working on anything that you could talk about that won't get you in trouble?
Yeah, I've have a couple of different novels that are in various stages of. Oh, the police are coming for me now. I don't know if you can hear
About your hotel room situation. I'm just
that. That one came close. I'm working on a couple different novels. I recently completed a novel and then a screenplay that is based on the novel that is unpublished that I wrote as well. I wrote a strange story about the very first adult X-rated movie that was made in 1916. There really is such a thing. It's called A Free Ride, and it's in the public domain, but you can't see it because it is still an X-rated film, and I just wrote about the characters, the actors, and the director, made up out of the whole cloth, just made up a story for them about how the film got made and them not realizing the magnitude of what they were creating back in 1916. So that's my latest work. I don't imagine it'll ever be published, but
Yeah.
you're hearing about it here in case it ever is. So, and then I have
Yeah.
some other novels that I'm really proud of too that I want to work on some more.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. So, Dean Monti, where can we find you online and on social media?
Lately, if you just Google my name, DeanMonti, you can find me. But I also have a website, deanmonti.com, and there my email address is on there. If anybody has any questions or wants to get in touch with me, they can also, I'd be happy to answer questions on writing. I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah, perfect. I know we'll make sure we got all the good links where to find you and all that good stuff. So, Dean Monti, The Monosexual, that book is available now. Thank you so much for your time and for your authenticity and for letting me pick your brain as to just this crazy, kooky story and heartfelt story that you came up with. And yeah, we can keep in touch if and when you publish those other titles, feel free to get in touch and I'd love to chat again.
I'll buy you a beer anytime, even
Oh
if I
yeah, I
don't.
know we're like neighbors,
Yeah,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And thank you so much, Megan. You're a wonderful podcaster, and I've been telling everybody that they should listen to more of your shows because they're really well done. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And there you go. That was Dean Monti talking about The Monosexual. That book is available now. The interview is available now wherever you find your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. Check the show notes where you can find links, where to find Dean on social media and where you can buy the book. While you're searching online, please find Cantina Book Club. Give me a follow and a like, and share with your reader friends, share with your book besties so that I can help. You can help me connect with authors with readers and all that good stuff. If you need book recommendations, find me at CantinaBookClub.com. I'm always posting reviews. Make sure that when you do find a book that you really like, please go, if you can, on Amazon, on Goodreads, and give them a rating or review, especially indie authors. It helps them out. It helps them out so much. Just a little thing. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.